We are on the road, and so are the East Wildcats, taking on Laredo Alexandria in the second round of the playoffs at United Stadium as the Wildcats continue their trek to try to get back to the third round like they did last year. Hello, everybody. Carlos Robledo along with Mike Gonzalez here for the Miriam Guerra Allstate Insurance pregame show. And once again, the Wildcats. It's Black Friday across America, and it's Black Friday for Weslaco East because, Mike, here we are again. Same time we were last year, playing a day after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Carlos, this time last year we were doing the same thing. We were preparing for a third round game. But this is a theme that's been going on the whole decade, Carlos. We're talking about the Weslaco East Wildcats, now 6-time by-district champions in this decade alone, now aiming for their 5th area round championship tonight here in Laredo.
They certainly have found a winning formula last week, taking care of business against PSJA, and here we are again in the second round, taking on Laredo Alexander. The Bulldogs are 6-5 on the season. Weslaco East is 8-3, and so Weslaco East, Mike, where has this? What is it that makes them so good that here we are once again in the playoffs?
Right. I think that starts from the top, Carlos, with the coaching staff. I think they have one of the premier head coaches in the Rio Grande Valley, and Mike Burgett, a longtime assistant, been a head coach at Weslaco East since 2013 and has done an outstanding job. And then he has a coaching staff that he can depend on, that can follow. He has one of the better defensive coordinators in Rene Guzman and the staff all around that's been head coach at one time or another. They know how to game plan. They know how to prepare for the players. And then, Carlos, they have the kind of players that will listen to them and do exactly what they say and have done an excellent job.
Yeah, and the players do help a lot, especially with Richard Lefevre. J.C. Vargas is back as well, and that East defense is playing pretty awesome also. Before tonight's game, there was a game that took place this afternoon in Vela. They beat Eagle Pass 28-10, so they're moving on to the next round of the playoffs, where they will be taking on Austin Westlake. As far as Weslaco East, if they win tonight, they're going to be taking on Cibolo Steel. That'll be the second year in a row. And time and place, they say next week, probably in the San Antonio area. Not sure yet if it's going to be on a Friday night or a Saturday night. So how did we get here? How did Laredo Alexander, a team that is 6-5 on the season, how did they get to this round of the playoffs? Well, let's take a look at their schedule and see what they did, because they started off the season not playing too well. First of all, they take on Alice, and yes, Alice is a team that is in the next round of the playoffs. They lost to Alice 27-13. Then they take on Laredo Nixon, losing that game 19-14. They play Schertz Clements, another loss. That one they were blown out 52-0. Then they take on Eagle Pass, a playoff team that made it to the second round. They played here earlier today. They lost that game 31-20. They beat Del Rio, member for them from last year. They won that game 37-14. Go back to a loss against San Antonio Southwest 35-24. Then they go on a winning streak, beating Laredo LBJ 21-12. San Antonio South 57-17. Laredo United South 29-21. A big rivalry game where they beat Laredo United 18-15. They won that game in the final seconds of the game. And then last week at McAllen Row, they beat them 42-17. Mike, what is going on with Laredo Alexander? We didn't even think as the season started that they would be in the playoffs.
Exactly, Carlos. Two reasons why, starting with the defense. The defense was allowing 30 points per game in the first 6 games. But ever since then, in the last 5 games, which is all wins, they've only allowed 17 points per game. The defense last week against McAllen Row got 6 turnovers, 4 fumbles, 2 interceptions. If you can get 6 turnovers in a playoff game, your chances of winning are likely. And the other reason, we'll get to it in a minute.
Yeah, a lot of people thought last week that McAllen Row was going to win that game against Laredo Alexander, but they surprised Row, and there could be a surprise here tonight. Who knows? Of course, Weslaco East is favored tonight. Now, who are the Bulldogs? Let's take a look at some of their players, because they got a couple of quarterbacks, not just one quarterback that they rely on, but 2 quarterbacks, a junior and a sophomore, Matthew Connor, who's thrown for over 1,200 yards, and Jose Rodriguez, 770 yards. Those are 2 players that they're going to count on. And then their top wide receiver, Albert Raurel, with 829 yards in receiving yards, and they have a sophomore running back, Camilo Pedraza, 889 yards, Mike.
Exactly, Carlos. That's the other reason why the Bulldogs are where they're at. Camilo Pedraza was a young man that was injured at the beginning of the year, came in the middle of the season, and the Bulldogs were able to move the ball a little bit better, and then they turned into a 2-quarterback system with Rodriguez and Connor. Connor's the starting quarterback, but in talking to the young man, Jason, out of the Laredo Morning Times, he says that whoever has a hot hand hand in the second half and into the fourth quarter is the one that will get most snaps in the second half, and it's worked out really, really well. Last week, both quarterbacks combined for over 400 yards. Camilo Pedraza had 44 yards rushing and a touchdown. Pretty normal day, but Albert Laurel, Carlos, is the guy that they got to look out for. 8 receptions, 178 yards, 4 touchdowns. An outstanding night for him, so watch out for him.
Yeah, and they'll do a lot of passing. Those are not running quarterbacks. They're not big on rushing yards. They got all those pass yards passing, and so look for these quarterbacks to come out here and fire that ball around. Now, as far as Weslaco, they've been relying on, Richard Lefevre to come out here and do his thing because Pedraza went down with an injury. J.C. Vargas also went down with an injury. So Richard Lefevre has taken over this team. And Lefevre with 100 yards rushing last week and 119 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. So Richard Lefevre once again carrying the team. Last week he did it against PSJ, and he's been doing that ever since that Los Fresno game. Right in the middle of the season, they found out that Richard Lefevre can run with the football.
Yeah, Carlos, exactly. We're talking about a young man, a 3-year starter, now going to make his 7th start in the playoffs now for the Weslaco East Wildcats, and I echoed on it in the pregame last week. This man is making a case for all district MVP, and then Coach Burgett echoed it after a game in the postseason. I mean, he has my vote there, and I know there's a lot of great players in this district, but I mean, I think Richard Lefevre has really put his name into the hat, has done an outstanding job managing that offense, taking that leadership role that Coach Burgett wanted him to take over, and because of what happened to J.C. Vargas and to Roy Pedraza, the key injuries, and Freddy Gonzalez, in the middle of the year, and he's really elevated his game to, I would say, 2 or 3 levels, which is awesome, and then you have J.C. Vargas back, who we're going to get to in a minute.
One of the things about Richard Lefevre is that he's just got incredible confidence now.
Right.
Started as a sophomore here. They moved over here from Ben Bolt, where he was a quarterback, kind of a little bit of a tight end as well. Came over here as a quarterback his sophomore year, played his junior, but he's been passing the ball as well very, very consistently and with a lot of confidence. So if you think that he's just a running quarterback, he's not. He's one of these quarterbacks who can fire that ball down the field as well.
And it's worth mentioning, Carlos, that he's the first quarterback under the Mike Burgett system to throw for 20 or more touchdown passes. He's already surpassed the 1,500-yard mark, has an outside chance to throw over 2,000 yards. If they could maybe win tonight, has a big night, and then play again next week, we'll see. But just an outstanding job by a quarterback under this system. I mean, you rarely see that.
And some of those wide receivers that you could look out for that he'll be throwing to, you got Jaime Banuelos, you got Hector Sainz, they call him Bones. Medrano also was one of those as well. And now J.C. Vargas is also back. And in fact, J.C. Vargas had 2 touchdowns last week. He had a hematoma, he had a muscle that they had to tear out, but he healed up after 5 weeks. He played last week, 2 touchdowns. I have a feeling tonight that we'll get to see a little bit more of J.C. Vargas because last week they used him pretty much sparingly throughout the game. Didn't play any defense, didn't return. I mean, this is like an all-purpose guy from a year ago. I think he'll get the ball a lot here tonight.
Yeah, I think so, Carlos. And I mean, you have your first game back from an injury. He probably woke up a little sore Saturday, but has game speed under his belt, feels much better. He probably took more reps in practice, and we saw the contribution that he makes to this team, how important he is utilizing his skills as a back, as a receiver, and heck, maybe even as a quarterback. There's some formations for him at quarterback. Don't be surprised in a Wildcat formation. I mean, he is that kind of player who makes a difference, and he only elevates the offense that much more. And I mean, we saw the difference that he makes with this team.
It'll be interesting to see how they use him tonight, maybe even punt returns or kickoff returns. But he's that type of weapon where, you want to get the ball in his hand. So Lefevre and J.C. Vargas, look for them to see a lot of action here tonight with the football. Now, someone else we got to talk about, or a team we need to talk about?
A unit.
Yeah, the Weslaco East defense, because the East defense has been playing outstanding over the past few games, and they've been all over the place, led by Freddy Cardenas going sideline to sideline.
Mike Gonzalez, also another linebacker, secondary, did an outstanding job. The unit had 4 sacks last week against the PSJA Bears, a high-powered PSJA Bears. Also had an interception, a key interception by Al Medrano right before the half, which in my mind was probably the biggest play of the game, the change of momentum. And Weslaco East was able to take advantage of that in the second half by getting the ball and just scored in just about every possession. And they also had a loss of down right in the middle. I think the Bears had something like a 15-play drive, and then they were able to stop that drive on the loss of down. And so just an outstanding job. And we got to talk about Trey Guajardo, the PSJA quarterback, who came in with 2,800 yards passing going into the playoffs, only held him to 122 yards. So just an outstanding job, I think, all around. What a game plan by Coach Guzman. And now they're going to have that kind of performance tonight against Alexander Alexander.
And don't forget about their defensive end, Fernando Garza and Gerald Garza,
Right.
both of them as well. There was one point last week where Guajardo was trying to set up a screen to the right, to the left, or in the middle. Nothing was open. He just had to throw that football away. So the Weslaco East defense is playing outstanding right now.
Yeah, Carlos, and I mean that, it's a combination of great pressure and the secondary just doing an outstanding job with their assignments. And as you mentioned, Trey Guajardo trying to look to the left, look to the right. He had nowhere to throw, was running for his life, and that's where Fernando and Gerald Garza make plays, and Mike Gonzalez and Freddy Cardenas at linebacker.
All right, so tonight, if you take a look at the reporters from across the Rio Grande Valley, everyone's kind of predicting Weslaco East. They have the better record, 8-3, but anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
It's this round of the
Absolutely.
playoffs, so it should be an interesting game tonight.
Absolutely, Carlos. And once again, the Weslaco East Wildcats on the road needing to do this. They did it last week against the Bears. The Bears started the year 8-0 and then dropped their last 3 games.
Yeah.
They're going to need to do the same thing to stop the bleeding that the Alexander Bulldogs have done in the last 5 games. And the great thing, Carlos, is that this is a team that's experienced, that are under a great coaching staff. Went 3 deep last year, are looking to go 3 deep for the 5th time this decade. So these are players that grew up in middle school and early in high school expecting to go very far. And so, I mean, I think they know what it takes. They arrived here yesterday. They probably had the little routine going on. They try to keep it as normal as possible, and they look focused to me.
The Wildcats are now entering the field right now, and it's worth a mention that Orlando Fuentes, Chucky, the field goal kicker, who last year won that game against Vela, he's back for this game here tonight. So on special teams, look for him to make a couple of key plays. The Wildcats are out here on the field, a great atmosphere, a decent crowd here. People have traveled from Weslaco East to watch this game. Now, if you are not here live, you can watch the game. Go to wic.us or look for us a link right here on Facebook, because Scott Harrison and John Boswell will bring you the broadcast live. So check that out, and then afterwards come back to Facebook, and Mike Gonzalez and I will have the post-game show. All right, we're here live at United Stadium, where it is Weslaco East versus the Laredo Alexander Bulldogs. For Mike Gonzalez, I'm Carlos Robledo. That is the Miriam Guerra Allstate Insurance pregame show. We'll see you after the contest.